And over to you, Brent. So as a principal, maybe you could give us a little bit of perspective on what happens in your school with regards to digital technology and social media.
Sure. Well, first off, I just think sometimes that when we think about schools and you got classrooms and you got buildings, I think that it's really important for us to get out of the building. And I think that's why it's so awesome that North by Northeast is letting a bunch of educators kind of come into the building and have this conversation with you, because I don't often think of this crowd as the crowd who's just right on the pulse of education all the time, but our two worlds should be totally combined, right? Because we're building them up, and these, I don't know, this is a reality, right? This creative reality here, and it should be reflected in our building. So I'm going to do a bit of the why before I get to the how. I think I'm a simple person, and I've kind of stuck my head, and education is not simple. Education is a weird, crazy beast. It's like a big boat, and it's hard to move, and that's why our schools, like, you can go into a school and see things that you saw 100 years ago, and 50 years ago, and so it's a complicated beast. But a couple of things that I've kind of hung my hat on through the last decade I've been in education. One of them is that our schools need to reflect our communities, and not only the reality of the communities, but they also need to reflect the communities we want to have. And the reality is that our kids are immersed in social media. If you are not to look at that, to tackle that, to leverage that in the classrooms and in the hallways of the school and as an administrator to my communities, then you're really missing a big part of school being a reflection of our communities. The second kind of construct that I think as a principal I hang my hat on is the idea that learning is both an art and a science. And the art of learning is about leveraging the capacities that are already out there. If I was, in my community, I've got kids who are, you know, little indie rock stars. I've got kids who are, love photography. I've got kids who are into comics. For me, not to leverage that in the school is missing out on a major opportunity. So I think the art is finding out and knowing your students and knowing your audience, using that engagement and applying it to the science of learning, which is taking that excitement and applying it to learning. So in the context of social media, what do we know about our kids? I'm at a school, J.H. Putman, and we have about 310 students in grades 6, 7, and 8. What do I know about these students? I know that these students are social creatures. We do multiple intelligences testing every year. It sounds like we've got them hooked up to probes or something, but we give them surveys to find out what they're interested in and what their learning styles are, and every year the #1 thing these kids tell us is that they are social creatures, they are interpersonal beings who need to work with each other. The other thing we really know about these kids is that they are attached to technology, and sometimes they're riding the technology, sometimes the technology's on top of them. They have a funny relationship with technology, but they're in it, it's the environment they're in. So we need to leverage that. A couple of the hows that we've done at Putman, and I think 3 or 4 years ago it wasn't uncommon to see in schools, and I'm sure it still exists in schools all over the place, where students who had an iPod had to keep it hidden. And the front of the agenda said, you may bring the electronics to school, but we can't see them. They should be kept in a bag or in a locker, and we're not responsible for them. And if a student in the computer lab was supposed to be working on their word processing, and darn it, they pulled out their email and were looking at their email, it was, oh no, you've got to put that away. So I think the paradigm shift that we tried to pull off at Putman, and I know at a lot of other schools, is this idea that this is stuff that kids are really, really great at, and just because we don't always understand it doesn't mean that it's an evil thing. So 3 years ago we started letting the kids, and it's a weird beast, right? It's like when you make a decision at a school, everything needs to be in triplicate, and everyone's got to agree on it. It's a crazy, crazy thing. But we said let the kids have their iPods. What we know about brain-based learning is that in a classroom there are 1,000 things to get your attention, and if a kid's got some music on, he's got 2 things to look at. He's got his work and he's got the music. So it's actually, it's a good thing. So try it out, and if it doesn't work in a couple weeks, well then we'll revisit it at the next staff meeting. I'll even put it on the agenda. And it was, and half the teachers, 3/4 of the teachers, 99% of the teachers were like, yeah, that's cool, it's gonna work, let's give it a whirl. And lo and behold, the iPods came and no one died. It was a beautiful thing. So then you move on to, and so it's all about clawing little things. And the teachers are amazing, because they're they're immersed in it more than me in the office. But email was the next thing 3 years ago we looked at, and now we're looking at texting and all this kind of thing, and opening it up and shifting from where we need to be the experts and always have to be leading to say, holy crow, man, this guy's 13 or 14, he's doing some amazing stuff with social media. Why shouldn't we be allowing him to go in that direction? When kids are great, we always look for their talents, right? If this is an area that they rule in, let's jump on top of it. So that's been kind of a formative switch. And the second thing that has been really successful at Putnam is something we started 2 years ago called Creative Labs. And we have a lab in a multi-use space that contains a library and computers and a whole bunch of different things. It's a pretty neat space. And typically that space has been used for children to do homework, to do research, things like that, get books out of the library. And so what we decided a couple years ago, we were talking about Andy Warhol's factory and how that was just a creative place. It was a creative factory, and we had another teacher on staff who worked in theater troupes, and it was all about output and celebrating output and creativity and getting groups of kids together. So we decided one day what would happen if we opened our lab up and we said, you can at noon hour come on in, use the school's equipment to do anything you want, well, within reason, to do anything you want with. The only rule we're going to have here is you can't do your homework. You can't bring schoolwork in. What you need to do is use this as a creative space. So use our digital cameras, make a movie if you want, jam out in the corner, do a podcast, work on some of the kids were using bit strips and some programs for making cartoons. Let's see what happens. It was amazing. It was amazing having the kids come in, work together, find their own little groupings, not based on the grade they're in, the feeder school that they came from, or the courses that they're taking, but on their interests. Because in a classroom, everything is so siloed. You are a French immersion student, you are an English student, right now you will take math, right now you will take this course. This was an opportunity for us to watch the kids in a playful environment, and these are middle school students in a playful environment, and say, okay, what is working really well here and how can we support this? So we had students coming in playing, you know, taking a picture of a buddy and photoshopping and doing all sorts of beautiful and inappropriate things with it. But then that kind of grew and they started to dig that. So we went down to our local photographer, our Henrys, and said, we've got some kids interested in digital photography. How about come on and give our guys a class? We'll create a club, come once a week and work with our kids. It's win-win for the community, it's win-win for our schools. We had kids picking up guitars and they wanted to jam out in a corner. So we opened another space in the school, put out a call to the high schools to see if they had some old musical equipment. So we got a drum kit. So a couple little punk rock bands started up. And these aren't things that we're the experts at, right? These are things that the kids showed an interest in, and we followed their lead and then supported them. Social media is a big part of all of this as well. It allows us, it's one more window into what the kids are interested in, what they're passionate about, and what they're really, really good at.
Okay, thanks, Brent.